Hello again, it's Rip Snow, the Employee of the Month, and I wanted to come to the next question in Matt Dillahunty's video regarding Pascal's wager. And I'm going to read the question so that I get it as accurate as I can get it. He says this: so far as I can see, I'm living the only life I know I will get in the best way I know how. So what's wrong with that? Well, from one human being to another, I don't see anything wrong with it, and I guess that's the end of the conversation. It seems to me that the whole dispute with regard to that question dissolves anything that might appear that would counter it. However, the question rests upon two flawed assumptions, and I'd like to unpack those assumptions in this particular posting. The first assumption is, this is the only life we're going to get. I don't know how he knows that. I don't know how any of us know that. In order to know something like that, we would have to have information that empirically came back to us from someone who had experienced life or non-life on the other side of death, such that they could tell us whether or not the afterlife is real. So I don't know how that statement even stands. To say that this is the only life we're going to get, so far as we can see, the limitation is so far as we can see. That seems like a terribly flawed, or at least at best, limited way to come to that conclusion. So if I want to look at afterlife as a possibility, how am I going to come to any informational prospects with regard to that? Well, I'm going to have to look to somebody who says they've been there and know something about it. Now, I realize this takes us into the tall grass of the gospel narratives and Jesus of Nazareth, who, being a person who was revealed to be of sterling character, spoke a lot about the afterlife. That's only one place we ground it, however. We also can ground it in the fact that of the 7 billion people presently alive on this planet, statistically 100% of them believe in an afterlife of some kind. It differs in the way in which the afterlife is experienced, and it differs in the way in which the afterlife is acquired. But the people who believe that death ends all for humanity and we simply become potting soil, statistically are zero. Now, don't mishear me. I'm not being critical in saying that their numbers don't matter. They're a large number. But statistically, they would be seen as zero if one were sampling for the truthfulness of this observation. So, the vast majority of people, and as a matter of fact, that's just dealing with the 7 billion we presently have. We figure right now that there have been about 100 billion people on the earth in the time in which the earth has been inhabited by human beings. And so far as any records or artifacts we can gather show, the afterlife has been something of concern for people throughout our history. Now, I realize this doesn't point to an objective empirical verification of an afterlife, but what it does do is leave the question open. With Jesus of Nazareth, you've got a person of great character. Even in the extra-biblical writings concerning his life, he was revealed to be someone of sterling character. So when Jesus talks about an afterlife as though it's a reality, I'm going to listen. As a matter of fact, when I look at his character and then look at my own, I don't even want to trust myself with the assumptions about an afterlife. I would far rather trust him and what we see that he has said concerning whether or not an afterlife is and whether or not it's important. So the first part of this question dissolves in my mind in that it's based on such a flawed assumption that there is no afterlife. The second part of it rests in what I would call the ethic of empathy. Now, on the surface, this ethic seems like a very good one and a way in which we can come to some objective standard by which we should treat one another as human beings. And as far as the ethic goes, I agree. However, there are a couple of things that underlie this ethic that I think aren't being acknowledged or even counted into this question. The first is we are Westerners. We're sitting here in this Western culture. Whether it would be Western Europe or the Americas, we are Westerners. And in that Western culture, we rest upon the assumptions of human worth being absolute. Where did that come from? It didn't come from the Enlightenment, although many argue that it did. No, it came from the broadening franchise of the idea that God created us. that our worth is grounded in a theistic source that is objective and outside of humanity, transcending humanity. If I ground empathy in nothing more than my desires, then I wind up with things like the Nazis. They were very empathetic toward their own because they had a stratified sense of what human worth was. Other Nazis were very valuable, but the gypsies and the Roma people and homosexuals and the Jews were not valuable at all. So therefore, the empathy need not be extended toward them. And human equality was the only standard by which that measurement was made and the empathy conferred. And since these people were beneath in the minds of the Nazis themselves, they conferred no empathy toward them whatsoever. So empathy is a shaky place to ground any kind of ethic unless the grounding of human worth is placed in something transcendent to ourselves. Just think of our own Constitution and Bill of Rights, that our rights are inalienable. Well, no, our rights are not. They are perfectly alienable if, in fact, the only place I can ground my worth is in what someone else says about me. Take any document, no matter how erudite and complete, like the Constitution, and erase from it the grounding of human worth in something transcendent to ourselves, and you erase the force of the document, and now everything becomes alienable. I think this is the other flaw in the way in which this question is posed. In other words, the best way I know how may not be the right way. The best way the Nazis knew was certainly not the right way. Just take, for instance, a point in history nearer to us. In the 70s, when the Khmer Rouge overtook Cambodia, they deemed that anyone who was an intellectual was not worth, in their minds, didn't have the human worth, was not an equal of the peasant farmer. And so they did away with anyone who was suspected even of being an intellectual. As a matter of fact, all one had to do during the time of the Khmer Rouge was wear glasses, and they were deemed an intellectual. And they were dispensed with to the tune of 2 million people in a very short period of time. So that's what happens when we ground our ethic in human empathy. Unless humanity's worth is grounded in something transcendent to us, empathy is not sufficient to give us an ethic wherein we won't eat each other up. And anybody who thinks that it is simply not acknowledging the fact that they are Westerners living in a Western country that finds its values and human worth in a transcendent source. So empathy works there. It works just fine. It is borrowing the theistic grounding of what human worth actually is, in that we are made in God's image. And therefore, human worth and human equality are intrinsic to the human by virtue of the fact that we are created in God's image. So, just looking at the question on the basis of the humanistic way in which it's granted, I would say, sure, why not? Carry on. But once I unpack the flaws that are in the assumptions that underlie the question, I see that this would be a terrible world to live in, where empathy was the standard. Because if the culture decided that I didn't deserve the empathy, then that conferred value would be removed from me. I don't want to live in a world like that. Human equality means too much to me to ground it in myself, or what in someone else, or even a culture or a world thinks of me or my family. And if you value human equality, then I would think you would want to at least acknowledge the fact that that human equality is grounded in a transcendent source wherein God created us in His image, and our worth is infinite before Him. So, I hope this helps. Until next time, I'll post about the next question that appears in the list. Thank you so much for your attention, and I also want to thank everyone who posts. And again, I will continue trying to respond to those posts as rapidly as I can. Thank you for the thoughtful posts I'm receiving, and thank you for watching. The Employee of the Month. Thank you.